Huge thank you to Caveman Studio for providing a review code for Contractors VR. Hello everybody, MadBrax here. Today we have a review of Contractors VR for the Oculus Quest 2. Contractors VR was a game I tried out in beta many years ago on the Quest 2 when it originally came out, but I just never ended up picking up. And I decided that now that I've started this series of reviews, it was finally the time to give it a go. So, a couple years after release, how is the game shaping up? Is it good? Is it worth the money? And most importantly, is it fun? Find all of that out and more today on our review of Contractors VR for Quest 2. Performance in VR is extremely important. If the game lags, you're going to have many players suffering increased motion sickness due to it. So, performance is one of the most important aspects in any VR game. So how is Contractors in that aspect? Well, firstly, Contractors is locked to 72 Hz even on the Quest 2, which is what the Quest 1 had. For some, the lack of 90 Hz or 120 Hz support is going to be a deal breaker. But for me, I don't notice the difference very much. So, the most important thing for me is that it's a stable 72 Hz. And thankfully, yep, it is. Throughout my playtime, there was a couple of frame drops I noticed, but overall, it was really consistent, really smooth, no complaints from me. And that's even more impressive when you look at the Ground War game mode available on Quest 2 and PC. That mode supports 16 players on one map, and these aren't just small maps, they are large ones, so it's really impressive. So, performance is going to get a 5 out of 5 from me. There is some frame drops here, but they're so infrequent that I don't think they deserve any points docked. Next up is visuals and presentation. Visuals and presentation are a key factor for immersion in VR, so every time a new title is released, I hope it will have some high quality and cutting edge visuals for its respective platform. So how does Contractors VR fare visually? Let's start with the environments here. Environments in a first-person shooter are often overlooked, but in VR, it's kind of a necessity for them to look really nice, and Contractors really does that well. The scope and scale of the environments is really backed up by some decent quality textures that at sometimes may look somewhat low quality, but generally they look really nice and convincing. Every environment here looks good and feels great to fight around in. Let's talk guns. Guns in first-person shooters should be the staple of your visuals. They should look great when you're going to be holding them all the time and carrying them around your battle environments. Getting up and close and personal by aiming down the sights and investigating them as you reload, and just taking a nice look at them from time to time. But for Contractors, some of its guns look odd. Like, for example, let's take the Desert Eagle, a staple weapon, one everyone knows if they like first-person shooters. I will pull the slide back on the Desert Eagle, and guess what? The iron sights are duplicated and stay behind. And that's something I saw on more than one gun in Contractors. It's very bizarre. And the texture work on the guns just isn't all there for some of them. Some of them look great, but others look bad. So the guns are a mixed bag for me. Before we get into the UI side of the visuals and presentation, let's talk about the file size of Contractors, because it's one of the larger games I've seen on the Quest. It takes up 11 gigabytes of storage for all of its visuals and maps and gameplay and content. And personally, I think that the file size here is justified, but you are still going to need to clear up a sizable amount of space. The visuals here look really decent, so that's a justifying part of it, and there is a lot of maps and content, guns. There is a lot of content in Contractors that's going to take up a lot of space. But anyway, let's talk about the presentation of the UI. The UI here is really nice in my opinion. It kind of looks like it was pulled straight out of a high-quality PC Call of Duty game. It's just really nice looking, and the loadout customization screen is great. It also looks like it was pulled straight out of a high-quality PC Call of Duty game. It's just, they did a really great job on the UI here. And it's something that feels like it could be in a flat screen game, but translates over really well. They even give you the ability to message with text to your friends. It's just really nice. And there's a lot of features in it that you're really gonna appreciate. Now, one section of the UI I was not particularly fond of was the settings section. That looks really unfinished compared to the rest of the stuff here, like the server browser and the lobbies. The UI for the settings just doesn't look complete. And don't get me wrong, all the settings that you need for this game are in there. You can turn off smooth turning, you can turn off turning in general, turn off snap turning, comfort options, all that good stuff. It's there, it just looks like the actual presentation of that is not finished. So, for visuals and presentation of Contractors, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I have docked it a point, mainly because of those low quality guns on some of them, but also because of the low quality textures around some of the maps, the weird looking settings UI, and just stuff like that that really gets on my nerves but isn't game breaking. But visuals mean absolutely nothing if the gameplay isn't there to support them. How is the gameplay of Contractors? And I've gotta say, the gameplay of Contractors is pretty awesome. Let's start with a huge immersion booster that's really unique to Contractors for VR multiplayer shooters. And that's the game's full body IK system. Full body IK means that you can actually see your player's body as you walk around the world, grab your guns, shoot, mount up on a door, something like that. You can actually see what your player looks like doing that instead of the traditional floating hands that you see in VR. And this kind of feels like it would be a small addition on the surface, but it completely changes the way that you play the game. And if you don't like it, of course you can turn it off. But it's a huge immersion booster that really just changes the way that I played the game. I went around corners more slowly. I played the game more immersive. It gave me a huge immersion boost that I just didn't have in games like Pavlov and Onward. It's just insane how much this little addition actually adds to the flow and just the way that the game plays for me. And on top of that immersion booster, there is like so many modes and maps here. You can go from your standard PvP team deathmatch to a control the point mode to kill confirm domination, and it's got its own unique modes as well. Then you have PvE modes that are single player and kind of feel like just little miniature missions, and then you have a awesome survival mode that plays extremely similarly to the old like Modern Warfare 3 survival game mode that I loved back when I played Call of Duty on the PS3. It was awesome, one of my favorite modes of all time, and it feels exactly like that to me. It's awesome. And the guns, while they may not look the greatest for some of them, it feels so good to shoot them. This game feels completely different than any other first-person shooter I've played in VR. I played it originally in the beta and kind of felt just like a worse version of Pavlov with a full body system. But nowadays, when I finally got to try it again after that beta, it's just insane how good this game feels now. Plus, it is super easy to get in a game with your friends. All you have to do, create a private lobby, give them a code once, and then you can add them to a in-game friends list and just invite them anytime going forward. It's super simple and it's super convenient for the cross-platform play that the game supports. And even after I've had this game for like a week and played it for many hours over that time, I have not had enough time to actually check out every single game mode this game supports. There is just so much content, so many guns. It's great. And they even have a full different World War II game mode. It has its own different loadouts and guns and everything. And instead of just throwing in World War II guns to the already large weapon pool for the modern guns, they created a whole different subsection with its own guns, so if you don't want to play modern, you don't have to. You can play World War II. And if you don't want to play World War II, you have your own modern. It's super nice, super convenient. And when you switch between each game mode, you can create different loadout selections for each of them with different weapons for each time period. And the scopes, I did have some trouble with some of the sniper scopes getting them too close to my face because they have a very strange, like, turn-on point for the Quest. I'm not sure if it's the same on PC because I haven't played enough of that version, but it is a strange turn-on point to where you have to get really close and your controller might lose tracking, and on top of that, it seems I had some trouble tracking in this game specifically with my front controller, where if I tried to aim down the sights, my front controller would snap down and completely throw off my aim, and I would often get killed because of it in a gunfight. But when I did get the scopes to work properly, they did look very good. They looked exponentially better than anything I've seen in like Onward or Pavlov when that still had scopes on Quest. Gameplay for me is going to get a 5 out of 5. It's some of the most immersive first-person shooter gameplay you can get on the Quest, and it's super fun to play this with your friends. I've played with my little brother, who loves VR first-person shooters and plays them with me all the time, and I also had a chance to try out the cross-platform play with one of my friends. That was super fun. It's just a great first-person shooter on the Quest. I can't recommend it enough. But let's move on to audio. It's not as important as gameplay in a first-person shooter, but you do want your guns to sound nice, and you do also want the environmental sound effects to sound pretty decent. It doesn't have to be the greatest, especially in a smaller scale indie game like this, but you do want those gun sounds at least to be nice. So are the gun sounds in Contractors music to your ears? Are the environmentals great? Do you hear birds chirping, stuff like that? Well, I'm gonna let you listen to it first, and then I will give you my opinion on it. Alright, now let's get to my opinion on the audio. So, let's start with the guns, as that's probably going to be the most important part of this whole soundscape. Some of the guns sound really nice, punchy, impactful, all the stuff that you want a gun to sound like in a VR game. However, there is some that don't sound very good at all. They don't sound like you'd assume they would, they sound too quiet. You probably heard it in the audio demonstration earlier, but it's a real mixed bag for the guns because some of them sound great, some of them sound bad. So it's really not the greatest gun sounds in the world, but they get the job done and they properly represent you firing a gun, so at least you have that. Environmental sounds are pretty nice. There's some birds chirping. In a couple of the maps, there's like guns firing around you, screaming in the streets from implied civilians along the outskirts of the city. There's just a lot of like tiny environmental details in the sound that are really nice and just add to the overall immersion factor. Footsteps are pretty much the same no matter what material you're walking on, so it's not the greatest. But something I do like is the shell casings really get impacted by whatever material they're hitting. So if they hit metal, they're going to have like a plinky sound. And if they hit wood, then it'll make some sort of like bassy sound. It's a really nice touch that just adds to the overall immersion factor. When you're in a gunfight, all the sounds go quiet and you can just hear the shells hitting the ground after an intense firefight. It's a really nice effect and adds a lot to the game. But overall, the audio is pretty decent, so I'm gonna end up giving it a 4 out of 5. The gun sounds are a mixed bag, but everything else is really, really nice sounding, especially those environmental effects and that shell casing. It's just like so nice. And with all our sub scores given, it is time to give the overall score for Contractors VR on the Quest 2. Overall, Contractors VR is the most immersive first-person shooter I've played on the Quest. Its full-body IK system really adds to the immersion factor and completely changes the way that I play the game. And its guns, while they may not sound the greatest, they do shoot and play extremely well in practice. And on top of some excellent gunplay, it's backed up by some sweet-looking visuals. I'm gonna give Contractors VR a 4 out of 5. Well, the guns and the gun sounds do leave some stuff to be desired, and there is some performance drops during larger sessions. That excellent gameplay really makes up for it and gives this game a 4 out of 5 rating. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review. Do be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more of my reviews, and be sure to comment down below what games you want to see me cover on the channel next. Anyway, have a great night. MadBrax out.